The ancient beginning, Xerxes, truth, and the first sin. Long before the world ever heard the names Edward or Alphonse Elric, everything began in a desert kingdom that no longer exists. Xerxes was once a flourishing civilization, rich in knowledge and ruled by a king obsessed with one idea above all else: immortality. Power, after all, never feels complete when it has an expiration date. In this kingdom lived a nameless slave, known only as Number 23. He scrubbed floors, followed orders, and existed to be overlooked. That changed the day his blood was used in an alchemical experiment. From that experiment came a strange, shadow-like being, sealed inside a flask. It had no body, no name, and no freedom. But it had intelligence, curiosity, and ambition. This creature came to be known as the dwarf in the flask. Unlike the humans around him, the dwarf learned quickly. He studied alchemy, language, history, and science, and he shared that knowledge with the slave whose blood had given him life. As a twisted gesture of gratitude, the dwarf gave the slave a name, Van Hohenheim. The two grew close, student and teacher, blurring into something resembling friendship. But the dwarf had dreams, big ones. Dreams of stepping outside the flask, dreams of becoming a perfect being. Those dreams collided with the king of Xerxes' own desire to live forever. What followed was the first nationwide transmutation in history. A massive circle carved across the kingdom, disguised as a ritual meant to grant the king eternal life. In reality, the dwarf manipulated every detail. At the moment the circle activated, the souls of more than 1 million people were ripped from their bodies. The entire nation died in an instant. At the center of it all, Hohenheim and the dwarf were dragged into the gate of truth itself. Each emerged carrying hundreds of thousands of human souls within them, transformed into living philosopher's stones. The dwarf finally gained a body identical to Hohenheim's. Xerxes was reduced to ruins. Two immortals walked away from the ashes, and the world would never recover. The long game. The founding of Amestris. Hohenheim wandered in horror, crushed by guilt. He carried the voices of countless souls inside him, unable to silence them. Eventually, he collapsed in the desert and was rescued by travelers from the eastern land of Xing. There he shared his knowledge, blending his advanced alchemy with local practices. This fusion gave birth to alchemy, a system focused on healing and balance rather than domination. Meanwhile, the dwarf followed a different path. Taking the name Father, he engineered an entire nation from nothing. Amestris was not built by chance. Its borders, cities, and wars were all carefully planned to form one massive transmutation circle. Father taught the population alchemy, but only enough to ensure dependence. He placed himself beneath the capital, acting as a filter for the planet's energy so all alchemy flowed through him. Wars followed. Cities fell. Blood soaked the land. Every conflict brought the circle closer to completion. Father also began shedding pieces of himself, carving out aspects of his personality and giving them form. These beings became the homunculi, named after humanity's 7 deadly sins. Pride, lust, envy, greed, sloth, gluttony, and wrath were not just servants, they were fragments of Father's own nature, unleashed upon the world. Over centuries, the plan continued quietly. No one noticed the pattern, no one questioned why Amestris was always at war, no one except Hohenheim. A fragile piece, Rezembul and the Elric family. Centuries later, Hohenheim finally settled down in a small rural town called Rezembul. For the first time since Xerxes, life felt almost normal. He fell in love with a kind woman named Trisha Elric. Together, they built a family and had 2 sons, Edward and Alphonse. For a brief moment in history, immortality didn't matter. Edward was born in 1899. Alphonse followed soon after. They grew up surrounded by warmth, curiosity, and books. Alchemy became a fascination early on, not as a weapon, but as a way to understand how the world worked. Then Hohenheim left. His departure wasn't driven by apathy or cruelty, but by fear. Father's plan was nearing completion, and Hohenheim knew it. He promised Trisha he would find a way to end his cursed life and stop what was coming. He never made it back in time. Loss and the ultimate taboo. Trisha Elric fell ill in 1904. Despite every effort, she died quietly, leaving 2 young boys behind. Grief shattered the peaceful rhythm of Rezembul. Edward and Alphonse were left with questions no child should have to ask. Why do people die? Why can't they come back? Those questions led them to alchemy's greatest sin, human transmutation. After traveling and training under the strict and formidable Izumi Curtis, the brothers believed they were ready. They gathered materials. They drew the circle. They told themselves they were different. Smarter, stronger. They were wrong. The transmutation failed instantly. Alphonse's body was torn away entirely, pulled beyond the gate of truth. Edward lost his left leg. In a moment of pure desperation, Edward sacrificed his right arm to bind Alphonse's soul to a nearby suit of armor. The price had been paid, but the result was cruel. Alphonse survived, but he could no longer feel, eat, sleep, or age. Edward survived, but with half his body replaced by cold steel. The truth had been revealed, and it was merciless. No turning back. With the help of Winry Rockbell and her grandmother Pinaco, Edward received automale prosthetics. Pain became routine. Determination replaced grief. On October 3, 1911, the brothers burned their childhood home to the ground. It wasn't an act of anger, it was a promise. There would be no returning to the past. Edward became the youngest state alchemist in history, earning the title Fullmetal Alchemist. The military gave him access, authority, and resources. In return, they expected obedience. The search for the Philosopher's Stone began. Lies, monsters, and the cost of knowledge. The journey exposed horrors no exam could prepare anyone for. In the city of Liore, the brothers dismantled a false religion built on a fake Philosopher's Stone. Faith collapsed, order crumbled. The truth left scars instead of salvation. Then came Show Tucker. Known as the Sewing Life Alchemist, Tucker welcomed the brothers into his home. His research into chimeras promised answers. Instead, it revealed one of the most disturbing acts in alchemical history. Tucker fused his own daughter Nina with her dog Alexander to maintain his license. The discovery shattered something inside Edward and Alphonse. Before justice could be served, a scarred man appeared and ended both Nina's suffering and Tucker's life. That man was Scar, an Ishvalan survivor of a war no one wanted to talk about. The Shadow of Ishval. Scar's hatred was not random. It was focused, deliberate, and fueled by genocide. The Ishvalan Civil War had been engineered to spill blood on a massive scale. State alchemists were sent in as human weapons. Entire communities were erased. Scar hunted those responsible, and Edward nearly became one of them. The brothers survived only because Colonel Roy Mustang intervened. The message was clear. This journey would not forgive innocence. The truth behind the stone. Clues led the brothers deeper into corruption. Dr. Tim Marco, a former state alchemist, revealed the horrifying truth. Philosopher's Stones were not miracles. They were prisons made of human souls. The fifth laboratory confirmed it. Prisoners were slaughtered, souls were compressed, stones were manufactured. The enemy was no longer abstract. It wore human faces, cracks in the armor. Alphonse began to doubt his own existence. A serial killer bound to armor planted the idea that Al might be nothing more than a fabrication. Memories questioned themselves. Identity became fragile. Only Edward's unwavering belief pulled Alphonse back from the edge. Not all bonds were made of alchemy. Greed, Doubleth, and the first glimpse of father. In Doubleth, the brothers reunited with Azumi Curtis, who revealed her own forbidden transmutation and its lifelong consequences. Human transmutation always took more than it gave. That reunion was cut short when Greed, one of the homunculi, kidnapped Alphonse. Greed wanted freedom, father wanted obedience. King Bradley arrived personally and destroyed Greed with terrifying ease. The message was unmistakable. There was something far worse than the homunculi pulling the strings. A world closing in. As the pieces moved into place, the cost became personal. Mise Hughes uncovered the truth behind Amestris's wars. Before he could speak, he was murdered. His death rippled through every ally left standing. It was, as someone once said, a terrible day for Rain. The brothers pressed on, unaware that the world itself was tightening around them, guiding them toward a role they never asked for. Fort Briggs, Alcahestry, and the country beneath. With every thread pulled, the bigger picture started to emerge, and it was terrifying. Realizing how far the corruption had spread, the Elric brothers left Central and traveled north to the icy fortress of Briggs. There, they met Major General Olivier Mira Armstrong. A woman of cold steel and sharper instinct, she didn't play politics. She only respected strength. Briggs sat above something no one was supposed to know existed. A massive tunnel dug beneath the entire nation of Amestris. A transmutation circle so vast it required decades, centuries even, to complete. The digger, Sloth. Ironically, the fastest homunculus, forced into endless labor. Up north, the brothers also encountered Mei Chang, a young prodigy from Xing, and her talking panda, Xiao Mei. Mei brought more than comic relief. She introduced the world to alchahestry, Xing's version of alchemy. Unlike Amestrian alchemy, alchahestry wasn't influenced by Father's control. It tapped into the natural flow of energy in the world, focusing on healing and balance instead of destruction. That made it dangerous to Father, and incredibly valuable to everyone else. Meanwhile, Ling Yao, a prince from Qing, had crossed the ocean with a single goal: obtain immortality and secure his place as emperor. His ambition collided directly with the Elric brothers' mission, but instead of becoming a rival, Ling became something else entirely. During a confrontation with Father, Ling offered himself as a vessel. Father implanted Greed's Philosopher's Stone into Ling, creating a new being, Greedling. The fusion gave Ling the power he sought, and gave Greed the freedom to resist Father's influence from within. An unlikely alliance was born. The sins show their faces. As the battle lines formed, more truths were uncovered. King Bradley wasn't just the leader of Amestris. He was Wrath. Born from a Philosopher's Stone forced into a human body, he was the only homunculus that could age. Ruthless, precise, and impossibly fast with a blade, Bradley was Father's sword and shield in one. His adopted son, Selim Bradley, was even more terrifying. A child in appearance only, Selim was actually Pride, the very first homunculus ever created, a being of shadow and hunger. Now, with Greed reborn, lust destroyed by Mustang's fire, and gluttony growing unstable, the homunculi's perfect machine was beginning to crack. But it wasn't just the homunculi feeling the pressure. Alphonse's body, still trapped beyond the gate of truth, was calling to him. He began losing consciousness, glimpsing the empty shell of his real self, still alive, still waiting. Hope returned. The brothers now believed they could undo the irreversible. The promised day approaches. While the pieces moved, so did the calendar. A date was set, a solar eclipse, a moment when the sun would be swallowed by the moon. On that day, Father would activate the transmutation circle beneath the country and absorb the souls of 50 million people. The goal? To become a perfect being, to take in God itself and become untouchable, eternal, and above the laws of the universe. To stop him, alliances were forged in secret. Scar, once a sworn enemy, joined forces with the brothers. Mustang and Hawkeye uncovered the final pieces of the truth. Hohenheim returned from exile and revealed everything. How he and Father had once been one and the same. How the plan had been in motion since Xerxes. In the underground ruins, Hohenheim confronted pride and gluttony. Pride consumed gluttony to increase his power. But Hohenheim wasn't just a man anymore. He was a walking philosopher's stone filled with 1,000,000 souls who willingly gave him strength. In secret, he began placing counter seals across the country, a way to reverse the transmutation and return power to the people. Time was running out. The Civil War ignites. On the surface, war exploded. The Eastern and Northern forces, led by General Armstrong and Mustang's allies, began their assault on Central Command. Civilians rioted. Truth spread faster than bullets. The military's lies began to collapse under the weight of its own sins. Mustang confronted Envy, the shape-shifting homunculus who had killed Mice Hughes. Consumed by vengeance, Mustang unleashed flame after flame until Envy's stone shattered, reducing him to a tiny, pitiful creature. When the others stopped Mustang from crossing the line, Envy, overcome with shame, destroyed himself. Justice didn't always wear the face of fire. 5 human sacrifices. Father's plan required 5 specific people, humans who had opened the gate of truth. Edward, Alphonse, Izumi Curtis, Hohenheim, and the final piece, Roy Mustang. Wrath and Pride forced Mustang to perform human transmutation by using Riza Hawkeye as leverage. Mustang was dragged into the gate, and in exchange for his new status as a sacrifice, he lost his eyesight. Forever blinded, but still burning with purpose. Now, with all 5 sacrifices in position, the promised day arrived. Father activated the transmutation circle. The eclipse reached its peak. The earth trembled. 50 million souls were ripped from their bodies in an instant. Father absorbed them all. At the peak of the promised day, Father achieved what he had spent centuries planning. He absorbed the souls of an entire nation and took in the power of God itself. For a moment, he stood beyond mortal comprehension, a being of pure creation. But such stolen power has a cost. Hohenheim, using the souls within him and the counter-transmutation circle spread across Amestris, disrupted the balance. Father's grip began to fail. Underground, the final battles raged. Pride was reduced to a fragile, crying infant. Wrath, the embodiment of controlled rage, died in combat against Scar. And Greed, once selfish and vain, made the ultimate choice. Choosing friendship over power, he allowed Father to absorb him, destabilizing his form from within. Edward, broken but unyielding, was ready. Alphonse, realizing his brother couldn't win alone, sacrificed his soul to restore Edward's arm. Whole once more, Edward launched a final, furious assault. Blow after blow, he shattered Father's core. As the gate of truth dragged Father back, he asked why he had failed. Truth's answer was simple. You saw the truth and still asked for everything. In the end, Father wasn't punished for seeking knowledge. He was punished for arrogance. If this journey through Amestris, across deserts and battlefields, and into the gate itself resonated, share the story, like, subscribe, and dive deeper into the world of Fullmetal Alchemist. There's always more to uncover when truth is watching. And remember, humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. That's the law of equivalent exchange. But sometimes what you gain is far greater than what you lost. See you on the other side.